Good evening and live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where we absolutely crushed it and survived the eclipse. This is Dr. John Stamey welcoming you to ScaryCast. As usual, we got a bang up show, a lot of fun co hosts, and a really exciting guest. Okay, first of all, the Dean of ScaryCast from the Midlands of South Carolina, the one and only Dr. Trey Dunaway. How are you tonight, Dr. Trey?
I'm doing fine, John. Yes, we survived the eclipse. It did seem a little dimmer, but we didn't have the total eclipse where we are, but it was still fun.
Well, that's great. You know, Bonnie Tyler had the total eclipse of the heart. So what more can you say?
There you go.
She just had the ultimate eclipse. No, she's great. That's one of my favorite songs. All right, and from Ewing, West Virginia, that has one blinking yellow light, kind of like where I grew up. Matt Delph, how are you tonight, badass monster hunter Matt?
I'm doing great. Doing great. Glad to be here.
And I want to thank you for mentioning and steering us toward our guest tonight. I've talked to her a little bit on the phone, and she seems really cool. That's the only word to describe her. Ladies and gentlemen, from Colorado, a ufologist, and she delves in the paranormal. She's a Bigfoot explorer. She does lots of cool stuff, and we've got her tonight to talk to her. The one and only Katie Paige. How are you doing tonight, Katie?
I'm doing great. I survived that eclipse as well. Here in Colorado, we only got about 60 some percent. So wasn't as great as totality, but it was still cool, like you said. So survivors.
All right, now I'm gonna tell you
Glad
what
to be
I
here.
did. You know what I did? I told my business partner, who's also my attorney, I said, you know what I'm going to do for the eclipse? I'm going to sit there and have two glasses of wine, sit there with my machete in case anyone tries to break in. That'll be the last thing they do, and I'm probably gonna go to sleep. And that's exactly what he did. He called me at 5. He said, "You still alive?" I said, "Unfortunately for you and everyone else." And he started laughing. So that's good. You know, that was my take on the clips. But anyway, thanks a lot for everybody being here. All right, tonight I would like to first introduce Katie. I got to know her through Matt, and he said, well, she is the former head of Colorado MUFON, and that is a massive and wonderful job. It shows great accomplishments in the field of ufology. So, Katie, if you'd like to start, tell us a little bit about your background and tell us about you being the head of Colorado MUFON, because that is a great accomplishment.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, like so many of us, we all, that are involved in these different paranormal topics, whether it's Bigfoot or paranormal or UFOs, we each have our own individual experiences with that and makes us curious. And that happened to me through childhood. But in 2012, I came in MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. I came in right as a field investigator. Years before that, though, for many years, I was in the paranormal world because I've had a lot of high strangest things around me. I think Matt and we talked about that. We've been on a few cool adventures out there. Trey Hudson's, the South Skinwalker Ranch location, which is undisclosed. But so that's how I got to know Matt. But anyway, I came into MUFON in 2012 as a field investigator. And worked my way up, had a lot of great mentors. Doug Wilson was the state director at the time, and he was just an awesome guy and trained me well. And just recently stepped down from that position in January of this year. Just a lot on my plate. So, but yeah, it's a good group here in Colorado. So it was a lot of fun.
That's great. And also, you and I and Matt have a mutual friend in MUFON, a very wonderful lady who passed away. Her name is Angelia Shear.
Sure.
And I mentioned her to you, and you said, oh, yes, she's wonderful. And Matt will say the same thing. So I guess we will take a moment and say, hello, Angelia. We hope you're listening to us from wherever you are. And we were so glad to know you. Is that
Yep,
right,
for
Katie?
sure. I have my little reminder of Angelia right here on my desk. It's it has angel wings, so she's an angel from above. It's a little alien with angel wings.
Right, that's
So
great.
she's always sitting right here with me. Yeah,
Well, good. Be sure to let her know that we all said hey.
I will. You hear that? She knows.
Okay. Now, you talked about high strangeness. That is a term. We know what that is. but there are likely a lot of our listeners and viewers that don't know what high strangeness is. Can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about it? And also, you've got an area up there in Colorado that certainly qualifies as high strangeness. So, once you explain it, then tell us a little bit about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the term high strangeness was coined by J. Allen Hynek years ago, and it really encompasses everything I just kind of talked about, whether it's cryptids, paranormal, UFOs, strange sounds, just a whole array of things, even military presence. So, the best high strangeness location that most people are familiar with, of course, is the infamous Skinwalker Ranch out there in Utah. And it was in 2013 I purchased this book. This was before Hunt for the Skinwalker and the Skinwalker Ranch series was out there. So it was not as well known as it is today. And I bought the book thinking it might have some similarities and commonalities to my experiences as a young girl. And my family and I spent time on a ranch in Colorado in the mid to late 70s. I'm aging myself here, but that's okay. I wear it with pride, I've earned it. Anyway, but we were threatened and warned to never talk about what happened out there. So I never knew it was investigated by anybody. And when I purchased this book, there's a chapter in the book called Other Hot Spots. And they start talking about a ranch in Colorado that was investigated by APRO, which is the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization. And Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD, was a part of APRO, and he was mentioned in the book along with two other PhDs, Dr. John Durr and Peter Van Arsdale. And John Durr was a seismologist out there. So for me to learn that people knew anything about it at all was shocking. And then to find out John Schuessler, who is one of the founding fathers of MUFON, he lives here in Colorado, and he knew of my connection to the Colorado Ranch. And he gave me the actual original briefing document about the ranch. So it's been over 10 years of doing a deep dive on this location. And really my focus has always been how much of this is paranormal, unexplained phenomenon, and how much of this is government black access projects that are being hidden and covered up. And I think it's both. That's why it gets so convoluted and confusing, actually, because we have a little bit of everything going on, a lot of these high strangeness locations.
Absolutely, we do. And I
Yeah.
tell you what, Matt and Trey, do you have a first quick round of questions, and then we'll let Katie continue. Matt, what you got?
I was gonna say something. Wasn't it Bigelow that purchased the Skinwalker Ranch, correct?
Yeah, he actually owned the Skinwalker Ranch, and at the same time, the Mount Wilson Ranch out there in Utah as well. And
Okay.
I mean, in Nevada, the Mount Wilson Ranch is in Nevada, Skinwalker Ranch is in Utah. But just recently, a couple months ago, I went to Mount Wilson Ranch and met Jeff and his significant other, Nick Knack. Carl Crusher does a lot of work out there too. So I'm getting to know him a bit, because I think it's so important to work just like we do, with Trey, down
Right.
south, all of us. And what a great team he has put together down there. And it's so important that we all, talk to one another, what's going on there, what's going on here. And now we're getting high strangeness locations, even as far as the UK. And so some of these strange phenomena that have been occurring for decades, that's the other big shocker for me, and being given the opportunity to do Beyond Skinwalker, the series, and the season 2 will be coming out the end of this month. And we filmed 2 more episodes out here at Rocky Mountain Ranch. So I'm excited to see how that all came together and was edited, because when you're out there filming for a week and you have cameras rolling all the time, you don't know how they're going to chop it all together in that 44-minute segment. So I'm just as excited as anybody else to see what makes it and what doesn't, and how they put it all together. But it was really a cool thing for me, and getting to know the locals now, that these things are still occurring. Now, here on this Colorado ranch, for those of you who have heard of Linda Moulton Howe, she was an investigative journalist back in the day in the mid 70s. And she really got her start in this phenomenon out there in Elbert County and in Colorado, investigating and researching these cattle mutilations that were almost occurring daily out there. I mean, Colorado Bureau of Investigations was involved. NORAD, Air Force was aware of this. There were no-fly zones over the county. Linda Moulton Howe actually did a film called A Strange Harvest, and they actually talk about the Sheriff George Yarnell and the Undersheriff Bill Waugh out there at the time of my childhood investigating these mutilations. I mean, her, along with Christopher O'Brien and Chuck Zukowski, has done a lot of work with these mutilations, not just of cow, but of horse. Of course, we have Snippy the horse out there. I think it was in 67 and Alamosa. The King family, they're awesome. But there were sheep and horse. I even found newspaper articles talking about dogs, and people were arming themselves, terrorized that they were going to go to humans next. So it was quite the big deal back in the day.
Now, so if Bigelow, now wasn't he the go-between so the government could use tax dollars to pay for the research out there? Does he still own that ranch? Do you know?
No, he doesn't.
He sold it, didn't he?
Yeah, he sold it to Brandon Fugel. But the research still continues. What's frustrating to me is Bob Bigelow and them, they're not releasing everything that they found, when they were doing with the NIDS and all that. So that's a little frustrating. I'm thankful that they have published a couple books, like this book right here, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, is a really good one. And this is really where they kind of tie in that hitchhiker effect. And I was guilty of that as well. I lived about an hour away from the ranch. So it's important to know I didn't live on this ranch location full time. My mom was dating the gentleman that owned the ranch, and he had 3 sons. The 2 younger sons lived with us during the week to attend a larger school district here in Colorado. So we would bring the boys back and forth on the weekends to see their mother, to do things on the ranch. And, we would spend some time on the ranch on the weekends. And of course, for those 3 years, we would always hear, police being called and don't talk about what's happening, mutilations. One of the very first things that were reported out on the ranch were these strange humming sounds and bangs underground. And some towns, the hum sounds would get so loud you couldn't hear yourself speak over it. So that was one of the phenomenon out there. Of course, there were Sasquatch sighted out there as well, but these are quite different. And Stan Gordon actually did a fantastic book. I'm sure you guys are all aware of Stan Gordon's work with the Pennsylvania Bigfoot. And he's the one that kind of started talking about, are they connected to these UFOs or craft? And out there in Elbert County in particular, I mean, this is not in the Rocky Mountains. So this is like flatland rural where we have these patches of ponderosa pines. So if a Bigfoot or Sasquatch, I prefer calling them Sasquatch, but if the Sasquatch lived there full time, I think we'd have evidence of that. So for me, they're either connected to the craft or they're interdimensional, going up, who knows, underground or whatever they're doing. In fact, that was one of the coolest things when we filmed season 1 of Beyond Skinwalker. It was my first time being back on the ranch since I was a young girl. So when I was on the ranch, I was 9 to 12 years old. So this is the first time back since I'm 12 years old, and it's getting dusk. And after researching for over 10 years, anticipation is heightened, right? I just wanted to get on that property and see what I remembered, see if the house still looked the same and the barns and all these different things. And we got an unexpected blizzard that night. And they wanted me to take them back behind the ranch house by the edge of the ponderosa pines, where I had this encounter with these strange, mysterious disappearing boxes, which is something I wouldn't talk about for a long time because it sounds just so crazy. But we have these other cases, like the Carl Higdon case out there in Wyoming, that he had an encounter with a box. We know Matt and Trey, and there you go, down at the south, had this encounter with a box. Now, albeit different, because Matt, didn't you guys see it on the floor? And you could see the investigators kind of walking through, and they disappear when you see this box shape. Is that right? Am I
correct?
Remembering
Yeah,
that right?
it was a cube that had, you could only see it clear. Yeah, it was a cube. And so we know it was, and we watched both, the team members walk through it. Trey's got it on video. You've seen it.
Right. Yep.
And they disappeared. So was this a cube? Is that what you've seen also then? A cube shaped?
Well, this was more of a box. And what's cool, let me grab this out of my drawer here. What was neat is going, Dr. Leo Sprinkle has the, all his 40 plus years of UFO work housed at the American Heritage Center in Laramie, Wyoming. And for me, that's just a quick 2.5-hour drive. So you can imagine, as soon as I knew he had all the original documents, I was like down there in a week, getting to know Dr. Leo Sprinkle. That's where the first book came from. But this is the original briefing document. It's quite lengthy. So, but in there, they actually talk about the boxes. And the box that I remember seeing, it's bigger than a shoebox. I want to say it's like 18 inches this way, not as wide this way. But the way I remember it back in that tree line is it was off the ground 3.5, 4 feet. And it made this like, if you've ever stood under like electrical power lines, you know, that like a kind of a bee sound, that it sounded like that. And my mom's boyfriend, Jack, at the time was getting something out of this outbuilding. And he sees a box, we hear the noise, and he's hollering at me and the youngest son to get back in the truck, get back in the truck. So we jumped back in the truck. And when we turned around to look at this box in the tree line, this is in the day, it was gone. It just disappeared. And so when I got the briefing document, it was cool because Bill Waugh, the sheriff, also had encounters with the box. Several adults had different encounters with the box. And in this briefing document, it says in there were supposedly 2 types of ETs spotted on. Now, I never had encounters with these ETs or saw them or anything, but the reports claim that there were these Nordic looking ETs on the property, the typical blonde, blue-eyed Nordics you hear of. And then there were these like tubey guys that almost looked half alien, half AI, and they had these strange tubes, this shield that kind of protected the front, and these heavy brows. And one of the neatest things, I'm going kind of off here, but you know, years later, right after I became the Colorado MUFON's guest speaker coordinator, I invited a gentleman named Sean Bartok. He had written a book called Flashbacks. I'm watching his presentation. His property was 14 miles away from the ranch. We didn't know anything about each other. I'm sitting there watching his presentation, and up pops some drawings of these same tubey guy. Like they had the tubes, the same. They almost looked identical. I was shocked. So maybe there's something to this, but the boxes, I believe, might be connected to those AI type of people or aliens, whatever they are. But in the briefing documents, they talk about these boxes as being lethal and that it could take a Sasquatch and drop him to his knees. And what's an interesting piece of this puzzle also, when we film for season 1 of Beyond Skinwalker, and if you go to historychannel.com, you can kind of see this special clip. They did the biggest remote view in the history of the country on this ranch property with David Morehouse. They had 70 remote viewers from around the world remote viewing the ranch in this certain a certain scary night we had on the ranch property. And one of the remote viewers actually drew a box with like a Sasquatch creature on its knees. I mean, I was just like, oh my goodness, you know, so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, so the boxes are quite fascinating. I was doing a conference in Laughlin, and I had a woman come up to me after the conference, and she was talking to me about, you know, could they be some sort of sound device that like calms people down, a communication device. As far as the cattle mutilations at the time, I've interviewed many of these ranchers that have had these mutilations, and something that is commonly heard is the pastures where these mutilations are being done, the cattle are calm and are kind of all huddled together, but in adjoining pastures, they're freaked out. So could those boxes be, you know, hypnotizing, so to speak, or using a sound frequency to calm the cattle before they mutilate them? I don't know, but different theories. So it's an interesting phenomenon. And then to find out that they have the same boxes in the UK as well, I'm like, you know, what's up with these boxes? No. I don't know if you guys have any theories on that.
Well, the cube, if you think about it, okay, me and Angelia, she knew everybody, of course, and we were talking to a professor that she knew out of Iowa, and he said that portals open up, and he said they can't predict when they're going to be naturally, but they always talked about spirals within spirals. Now you got to have a zero magnetic field, and you got to have a huge energy burst like a solar flare. So, but I know in Oak Ridge there is a professor that was trying to run nuclear energy down a tube, trying to make mirror universes. So with these areas that we've noticed, the magnetic field's always messed up, but they are symmetrical. So it's not spirals. So a third-party entity has created these things. And if you look, of course, the noise, it's got to have high energy. So your Geiger counter goes way up. Whenever all this stuff happens, you've got high energy. Have you ever seen the movie Hellraiser? They got the cube. No. It's a portal to hell. It opens up and it's a portal to hell. So the cube, to me, I believe it's a portal to other dimensions. And since it's symmetrical, it is a third party entity has created this, and they're using this as a device to time travel, parallel universe, whatever you want to call it. That's my
That's
theory.
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting
All right.
because when I was out there taking the film crew to behind the ranch house, the blizzard, it's late at night. I'm trying to see I mean, it was coming down hard. You could see it on the episode, like beards are frozen. It was really cold. I was not prepared. So I'm soaking wet and freezing. But as I'm like kind of leading the group, taking them to where I saw this box, and in the blanket of snow, you see these tracks just come out of nowhere in the snow, and they're one in front of the other. They're not cow. There's no cow on the ranch right now anyway, but they're not horse. They're not cow. They're not deer or elk or any other animals. These were strange looking big prints with a pretty good stride. But what the weirdest thing was, they just disappeared again for maybe 12 to 15 feet and then reappeared and then disappeared again. So it was as if something came up, walked as if it was curious, like, what are these people doing in the night in a blizzard in the woods, and then went down again and then came up and then disappeared. And I'm really happy they caught that on film, and it's in that episode. But it was really, really strange. And I do know, in looking at places like Skinwalker Ranch and Marley Woods and Blind Frog Ranch and some of these other areas of high strangeness out there in Sedona, California, they all really are highly magnetic. They ping the charts as being highly magnetic. Many of them have aquifers underground, so you have this water, and they have very similar geographic or geological elements, the limestone and the quartz and all that stuff. So I think a lot of these locations have those in common that, like you said, Matt, can maybe allow us to interact with the phenomenon more or open up portals or wormholes or something. So it's really interesting to look at that. And I do believe, with talking with James Keenan too, like, that's a good tip to carry an old fashioned, compass with you. And if that thing starts spinning, like, get out of there, because you don't want to go missing. Like,
Another thing also,
missing 411.
If you got a Geiger counter, the tracks that you find, measure them to see if there's any radiation. See if it has come out of something. So one thing I always stress is take your Geiger counter, check these tracks that disappear, or any set of tracks that you find, check see if there's any radiation.
Right. I mean, just up there just recently at Mount Wilson Ranch, we're going up to the caves, and and Jeff was shocked because they're in the snow, the same kind of thing. And he's never had Sasquatch there before. And I'm like, what are they following us up here? But there was a very unusual print up there on that ridge by the cave. That same kind of thing comes out of nowhere, leads to nowhere. And it has, toes in the snow. Like, you're not walking around with bare feet in snow. So very unusual. Yeah, but I never thought to actually measure the magnetic fields around those. So we'll have to be better equipped next time.
Absolutely. Dr. Trey, do you have a question or comment for Katie?
Well, I am so happy, Katie, to have you here, because we don't have a lot of UFOlogists around that come on our show. So, and I keep telling John, we've got to have more stuff about UFOs. This is a more 30,000-foot question. Over the past few years, I mean, it used to be, if you're a UFO person, you're a wacko. That's for years and years and years. That's what it's been like.
Right.
But recently, over the past couple of years, it's become mainstream media. And we now have very reputable people in the government, congressmen that have been quoted to say they were warned off, that people can't handle the truth, and we have more and more where it's becoming more apparent that there is definitely government involvement, and the things that they've denied in the past, they've walked back on. With the video from naval pilots and people that are in positions to actually do recordings. And all of this seems to be coming to a head, or at least way in advance of what it used to be. What is your take on why now?
Mhm.
What are the reasons that you see that it could be becoming a lot more mainstream, where it's much more accessible information for people?
Right. That is such a good question and something I've given some thought to as well. And, just to kind of put it out there, I go back and forth on the UFO phenomena in general. I think a lot of what we're seeing is our own stuff, secret
Hmm.
projects. And, what better way to cover up, our own technology that we don't want, other countries to know about than to say, hey, these are extraterrestrial in nature. Pay no attention. This is not us.
Sure,
So I think the
sure.
vast majority is that. Now, does that negate everything that's out there? No. All you have to do is, this whole library here is filled with decades worth of work, and headed over to the National UFO Historical Record Center out there in Albuquerque, which has all original Project Blue Book and NICAP and CUFOS and these organizations that have been out there for decades. And you walk in and you see boxes of reports from very credible pilots and other, military witnesses. There's something to it. So it's not all our own. So yes, I do believe that there's something here from somewhere else. But the reason why I think, we've seen where we're learning more, and then it's like one step forward, two steps back,
Hmm.
oh, let's put this out. And then now let's say there's nothing to any of this, and we're back to the tinfoil hat again, which is super frustrating.
Right.
However, the reason I think now, well, first of all, it seems like there's certain people who are more vocal that want what we call disclosure. I think disclosure is just going to be coming from the general people and maybe extraterrestrials themselves. I'm not holding my breath to ever get that from government. But I think the Navy and the Air Force, I think there's liability issues, because I do think since the late 40s, 50s, 60s, especially with MK Ultra and some of these other projects that were going on, there's liabilities. People were injured, people were killed, and they don't want that to ever come to the forefront. So we'll never get the truth about that. And I'll probably never get the truth of what was really going on some of these ranch locations, honestly. But I think that the reason we're hearing more about it now is because of exactly what we're doing here right now with this podcast.
Right.
There's too many of us out there talking, and they can't keep us all quiet anymore. And there's a lot of these people that are working for, let's say Lockheed Martin or General Electric or Raytheon, these places where they have supposedly back engineered some of these metamaterials. And even on the ranch, I came across a really cool old newspaper article from the 70s, and there's a photo of a metamaterial found on one of these ranches that looks very, very different than anything I've ever seen before. And of course, whoever got their hands on it, nobody can find it. So I do believe we've been back engineering things since the late 40s. So, but I just think this is like a big snowball rolling downhill, and they can't stop it. So they have to say something, because we're
Right.
demanding it. Yeah.
Well, I think this is an interesting time when the covers start coming off of some things. And like you just
Right.
said, I don't think, governments, they keep secrets for all sorts of reasons.
Right.
But I did find it interesting. I've heard one person say, well, we couldn't handle the truth. And then on Netflix, they have the three body problem. Have you seen this recent edition?
No, I haven't
It's
seen this one. No.
sci-fi, and it's people that are 400 light years away that are coming to invade the Earth. At least that's the part we're at right now. But in that, when it's announced that there are aliens that are arriving in Earth, now they're supposed to arrive 400 years from now. There are riots. There are riots in the street. There are people hanging themselves, suicides, all sorts of mayhem, which goes right along to that phase where you say, "Well, people couldn't handle it." And even the actors in this, or the lines say, "How can they be reacting this way? This isn't going to happen for another 400 years." But yet people have gone off the deep end. So that's just a reflection of that. It's just silliness. It is absolutely silliness. If somebody were to say, oh, there are actually aliens, and we have been able to reverse engineer some of their products, which is why we can do some of the things that we thought would be impossible for years and years and years. I think I, for one, would say, well, they weren't bothering me yesterday. Why should they bother me
Right.
tomorrow? I mean, if we're getting a benefit from it, it's just very interesting, and I'd like to know that. So
Right.
we'll see,
I think
won't
it's
we?
funny. Yeah, we'll see. And I think it's funny. We had a guest speaker one time and he was sharing information about S4 and, these things that are kind of mind blowing to hear. Right. But I always laugh because so here I am for 3 hours learning about area S4, which is by Area 51. If you're not familiar with S4, do some research on it. It's quite fascinating. But at the end of the day, right after that 3-hour meeting of learning this unbelievable stuff, my mom's like, "Hey, can you stop at Walmart and pick up my medication and a gallon of milk or what, my creamer for my
That's right.
coffee?"
That's
And I'm
right.
like, at the end of the
Life goes
day,
on. Yeah,
life
life
goes
still
on and we
goes
have to go to
on. It
work and we
does.
have to buy milk and creamer and medicine.
That's
And
right. And
so,
you got
I
to
mean,
wait
even with the
forever
news
in
that came
the
out, I thought
pickup
people would
line.
care more, but they don't care. I mean, they're just like,
Right.
okay, well, that's interesting. Time to go to work.
Right. Because if people really cared, they would think that the cube is actually a portal to hell, and it lives in the US Capitol building because there's so many whack jobs out there today. So, if you got
Right.
into that, you'd assume, well, of course there's a portal to hell.
Well, right. And that is a legit
That's where
concern.
all the
Like there
that's
are
where all the
people in
politicians
Congress.
crawl out of. So there
Right.
you
Well,
go.
and the politicians, some of them don't want to touch the topic
That's right.
because they think it's evil. So that there is a
Yeah.
legit piece to that. Like they're like, no, 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 we're not going to be talking about UFOs and aliens because they believe it has an evil element to it. I personally do not, but some people believe
I
that.
think if you're looking for evil, you can find it in a lot more humans than you would in most aliens.
Mhm.
Hopefully, aliens are advanced enough to know evil isn't probably the way to go.
Right.
Well,
Personal opinion.
Yeah.
good.
Glad you're here, Katie.
Good opinion. I hope so. All right, Katie. It's time for our magic moment where we thank our sponsor, Mind Zero, the great sauna and the great sauna and cold plunge here in Myrtle Beach, South Kings Highway, opening a location in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, near Charleston, opening in Boulder, Colorado. So if I come out there, we'll all have to go to Mind Zero, do the 200-degree
right.
sauna and the cold plunge. It is invigorating and exhilarating. It's a wonderful thing. So mindzero.com, check it out. And thanks Mind Zero for keeping us on this wonderful adventure that we call ScaryCast. It's always a lot of fun. And Katie, you've been a lot of fun too. Let me see. I have some more questions I was going to ask you. You have the Rocky Mountain Ranch Foundation. Can you
Yeah,
tell us
I'm
a
just
little
starting
bit about
that up. I'm just starting that up. It's so interesting. So this location in the APRO reports, and if you research it online, it was known as the Clearview Ranch in folklore because the townspeople and the sheriffs and the locals didn't want the location known, which is fascinating to me, and I think adds credibility to the case, right? Because they're not out there trying to sell books or get on TV or be famous. It was important that this stay hush hush for decades, really. It wasn't until Katie came on the scene with her big mouth and said, it's in Elbert County, Colorado. And I thought, uh-oh, people in Elbert County are going to be a little mad at me if, they start getting inundated with curious onlookers. But, and then, of course, Beyond Skinwalker came on the scene and they dubbed it the Rocky Mountain Ranch. And I figured, well, most people are going to know it by that now. So I'm calling it that. But, what was the question? I went off.
I was going to say, well, tell us a little bit about it. Isn't that related to your new foundation?
Oh yeah, right. The Rocky Mountain Ranch Foundation. That's where we're going. Right. I was just starting that. That's why so I did a podcast for a few years with kgradb.com, which was a wonderful opportunity. And of course the state director of MUFON. But I am now focusing my energies and I'm just starting a nonprofit foundation called Rocky Mountain Ranch Research, and, talking with Trey and I working with other team members and Matt and other people, Paul in the UK and Dr. Simeon Hine and others. I'm, in the process of putting this team together where we just collaborate with one another. So I'm going to start a YouTube channel where I'm going to take all of you guys on my adventures with me as I go out there on the ranch and do different experiments and try to learn what's going on. Like I had mentioned before, I have people talking to me now about perhaps some CIA involvement, MK Ultra involvement, some clues coming out in the research I'm doing, some really good threads and leads. So it's kind of a way for me to have a way to share with everybody out there. So, you can keep an eye. I have a website, it's katiepaige.net, and there's a tab for Rocky Mountain Ranch Research, and I'll be updating people when I launch that website and all that. So if you're interested in following that, you can find that on my website. But I'm really looking forward to doing that because it's really going to just focus what I'm doing into this narrow kind of groove. So it's my new baby, and I'm excited to be working on that.
Okay, and I've got a question. This may be a really dumb question, but I don't think there are dumb questions, especially in this paranormal world. You just made a mention of current MK Ultra. What does that statement mean?
Well, when it comes to the ranch, when I went down to the archives and Dr. Leo Sprinkles, he had 72 boxes, and in his personal handwriting, there was a mention of his last name was redacted out, but it said Warren blank redacted out visits the ranch from Camp Carson. So question number one, why is there a soldier from Camp Carson on the ranch property? But he continues to say, he felt something take over his mind, made him walk towards the woods. It would release him, whatever it was. He would run back to the ranch house, and this did this to him 5 times. So, and then there's other little clues within the ranch. So one of the main gentlemen that lived on the property was military, started in San Francisco in the 60s. And we kind of know there was a lot of activities happening in San Francisco in the 60s with MK Ultra and things. And this current person, this witness I'm talking to, her father was deep in the CIA. He has since passed. I'm going to go do an interview with her and the brother and the mother about his ondoings, but he was here in Colorado so there's these different clues, and they talk about these different legal LSD and what they call FM drugs that they were experimenting with. So, I question even the Sasquatch encounters, because the Sasquatch that was encountered on the ranch too, they would bang on the ranch house and things, like they were trying to scare us off the property. And I'm like, is that real Sasquatch behavior? I don't know. It's not my specialty. What do you guys think? Are Sasquatch known to like bang on houses or anything like that?
Absolutely.
Oh, really? Okay.
In fact, Katie, I have an experience in Northeast Georgia where I'm sitting there. It's 11 o'clock at night, and something beats the hell out of the cabin. It moved the cabin maybe a couple of inches off the foundation, and it was terrifying. And then the next morning I said, oh, well, anybody could do that. The only thing I got was a sore shoulder trying to run into the cabin. I mean, something. No, I'm serious. That is my kind of.
All right. So maybe it is genuine. I mean, and that's the other, that's what keeps happening to me, right? I keep thinking, well, this could be done by humans or that could be done by humans. But at the same time, just like the experience when we were filming Beyond Skinwalker, it was snowing so hard, our footprints were getting covered pretty fast. And it's not like somebody ran out there and made these tracks and then made them disappear. Like that was very unusual, and I can't explain that away. And it was also that same night, and it didn't make it in the episode, but it was the next day. We had a day off of filming, and my daughter came down to Castle Rock with me. We just went for lunch, and I actually went to the outlet stores, to the Columbia store, to get like long johns and new gloves and snow bibs because I was so unprepared. But we were having lunch, and my shoulder started bothering me. And I'm like, Jenna, is there something on my back? And there were this big handprint. I don't know if it was a radiation burn, but it almost looks like 3 claws on my back. It was blistered. It was really bad. And it really scared me. So I don't
Now,
know what that
Katie,
was
let me
about.
interrupt. When you said there were marks on your back, was it on the
Mhm.
skin of your back or was it on clothing?
It was on the skin on my back, and it
Mm,
was hot to the touch.
mm,
So like when my
mhm,
daughter touched it, it was really hot. It blistered, looked like 3 almost
Hmm.
fingerprints on it. It was the size of my palm. I have a lot of photos and videos actually, and the film crew actually filmed it the following day just so they had it
mhm.
recorded. Um, but I had many layers of clothes on because I was unprepared. So I had like a hoodie, a vest, a coat. I mean, I had several layers, and somehow this still managed to get me on my back. I don't know who or what that was, but it was quite frightening. So much so we went to King Supers and I bought a white candle, and my daughter is freaked out by it, and
Mark,
And your clothing was unaffected.
yeah, clothing was unaffected.
you've been
Hmm.
marked. That's a whole different rabbit hole, but you've been marked. Three claw marks down your back.
Well, I mean, that's not the first time. I mean, through years ago, I would wake up and have 3 scratches down my arm or down my back. So that's been ongoing for a long time. And that's why, skinwalkers at the Pentagon is kind of interesting because as a young girl at the house, and, I made the mistake of compartmentalizing all these different phenomenon. So I was having things happen on the ranch. But at my house, which is about an hour away from the ranch, I was seeing shadow figures, having paranormal activity, having these scratches, things like that happening. And I compartmentalized these different things and didn't connect them until just really recently, in the last few years. So, and it was quite frightening back there. A sense of always being watched. I don't know if you guys have experienced that feeling, but a sense of being watched all the time was pretty intense.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
is. It is. I'll tell you that.
That's quite an experience. Katie, as far as your healing of this area on your back, how long did it take for the marks to dissipate, to go away, for inflammation to go? What
Probably
kind
about
of
a
a
week and a half.
so not
Yeah.
not much different than you'd expect if you had a chemical
Right.
burn or something else in
Right.
that range of
Right.
time.
And I have
Hmm.
racked I'm like, okay, what could have touched me? I mean, could it have been like an allergy to a new piece of clothing or something like that? But nothing I was wearing was new. And you sense it, like, use
No,
that
and if you
nose sense. I
changed,
mean, it was just, yeah,
yeah,
it was
yeah, if you change
really
your
strange.
laundry detergent or your shampoo or whatever, you'd have it in more places than 3 areas. So
Right. Yeah. And it does. It
that's
looks like a
pretty
handprint with a
significant.
palm on it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's
So
pretty
I'll send it to
significant.
you, Matt, so you can see it. I'll send it to you in your
Okay.
messenger so you can see
Yeah.
what I'm talking
That,
about.
that, that
Yeah,
would, that would be
I'm
great.
pretty sure I know what you're talking about. And like I said, that's a whole different rabbit hole.
Right.
But
And that's the other thing. And History Channel doesn't like to talk about it, so you're going to get it exclusively here. But when I met the people that live on the ranch now, and they bought it right after we left. Okay. So they've been there over 30 some years, and they had no idea of the history of their location. So I was really curious to see, if their daughter, Nicole, who was born and raised on the property, she's on the show as well, had similar experience. And she did. She always felt watched, especially at night. She said there was something in those ponderosa pines in the back, perhaps Sasquatch. She had experience with the shadow beings as well. So we had similar encounters. Okay. But they didn't know anything about this whole history of the ranch property. And so we're sharing live on camera. I'm telling them about the history, and they're showing old photographs and things like that. And what he told me, and my reaction was I was stunned, but they said when they bought the ranch way back, there were carvings in the trees, and there was a location behind the house that looked like a sacrificial table, and maybe they had some sort of not so good things going on back there. I know my mother and her boyfriend wouldn't have been involved in that, but perhaps some other adults in the area that I'm kind of suspicious of might have been dabbling in some not so good things. There were certain stickers in some of the windows in the ranch house. And I went like white as a ghost, because I'm like, did they open up something they shouldn't have? And that thing attached to me at a young age. So I kind of got in this like fighting mode where I wanted to protect myself in white light. And like, you could have messed with me when I was 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, but I'm grown up now. And guess what? back off. And then to have that happen to me on my back, I'm like, what was that all about? So
it's interesting when you said you moved from this location 30 years prior, and the current residence, is it related to the individual with the experiences they have, or does it affect all of them?
I think that's a really good question, and something I've been really, really curious about, because my sister, she's older than I, so she would have been in her teenage years. As a matter of fact, she went to the high school prom out there during those years with the oldest boy that lived there. And she handled it very differently. She's very interested in these topics, but she was like, I don't want anything around me. I don't want to do a deep dive on it. I had to talk her into going with me back to the ranch for season 2, and I'm really glad she did. But I've often wondered why it affects certain people certain ways and other people certain ways, right? And that's same with the family that lived on the ranch all these years. Like the father, who is a very Greg is his name. He's a worker. He's working on projects. He's working on the Jeeps. He's working on this and building that. And he isn't really focused on phenomenon necessarily. And so he hasn't experienced a lot. But if you talk to Nicole or the mom, they have had different types of experiences, both in and outside the house. So is it just a matter of paying attention and being focused on it? I'm not sure. Or does it like to target certain individuals? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a very good question.
When you said initially, you talked about, what was the term? High strange? Was that your high strangeness? Yes. My life has been low strangeness.
Right.
I've maybe experienced something once that I can't explain, but the rest of my life has been low strangeness. So when I'm on this show, I'm the low strangeness guy. That's
so funny. I have
you're the skeptic. You're the skeptic. The last time we were on the show, somebody said, "Oh, so you're the skeptic. You're a physician and Western trained." And I said, "No, it's not. I just personally, I'm a low strangeness kind of environment for me. So I'm always curious about that. Is it the individual? Can you learn to be, become a mid strangeness person, or once you're low strangeness, can you be? Matt, you're just stuck there forever?
Yeah, he mentioned something. Okay, everybody's got different vibrational frequencies, and I think a lot of it. We talked about this, Katie. I am RH negative. I'm A negative blood type. So supposedly they can't.
My mom was A negative though. She was RH negative.
I knew somebody with you was A negative. I was thinking it was you. Angelia was A negative.
My mom. Yeah, my mom was.
So most of these people, if you look back through blood history, it can't be traced back to anything. So you got the racist factor, and the racist factor, it goes back to the monkey way back in Africa. That's the positive. But we don't have that in our blood. So the characteristics, that's why the government likes remote viewers and stuff that are RH negative. They've got more, a lot of people are tuned into channel 1 on the radio. So some people are born opened up to all these other channels. I had to have an experience for me to start seeing stuff more open. It had to awaken me, had to raise my frequency. Because born, raised, Bigfoot's not real, UFO, all that stuff is whatever. And I had my experience, and I seen it for myself in my own eyes. And it was an aggressive encounter. I'm stubborn, so it had to be super, it opened up my eyes, woke me up to whatever else is out there. I think a lot of people, though, are frequency. They're not level. They're not right there. I believe Angelia was talking about, for example, there was 10 people out on the beach looking at this UFO thing, but only 4 of them could see it. I believe it's different openness to this stuff. Like if one person is tuned into channel 1, then something happens to them, then all of a sudden, boom, they can feel this different stuff going on in frequencies 3, 4, and 5. And it's basically, it's our makeup of our body, but everybody possesses the ability to open up to it. Monroe Institute helps you do it a lot.
Right. I was going to say that, Matt, and there's a few good books out there about it. If you research, I think even back in the Freudian days, they did some studies on what they call disassociation in the paranormal. So people who can disassociate from their bodies, whether it be through trauma, which I had a lot of trauma in my past, which we won't get into, or remote viewing, meditation, near-death experiences, these different types of things where some people that kind of can go into an altered state when they're in deep meditation, right? We're kind of leaving our bodies and astro traveling. They say that people who really practice at doing that, and anybody can practice that, right? So we all can do it. So once you learn to do that, it's almost as if you're connecting into something in the ether, so to speak. And once that connection's made, be careful what you wish for, because, you might have some things you're not so comfortable with in your house. And that's the other scary part. You don't know what you're inviting in. So I always tell people, you really have to be careful. And then there's also the analogy of, what you focus your attention on, just like if you're in a dark cave and you're focusing a flashlight, whatever you focus on, I think we have a role in the phenomenon also, because I think we play a part in manifesting some of it. And sometimes it'll get so intense that I'll unplug it like an outlet in a wall. I'll be like, okay, time to focus on other things and get out of this for a little bit, because it does get intense. Do you find that too, that if you focus more on it, then more things tend to happen? So
that's a good statement. I'm going to have to say something that I've never said before. I have a number of friends that use me as a psychic and remote viewer. And I can't do it until after I've had 2 cocktails. Then I can just do it. And I mean, it's like I have a friend called up and said, can you have 2 drinks and tell me what's going on with this girl? And yeah, I'll do it. And I tell him what's going on with her, and damn if I'm not right usually. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, John, is it a gin switch or a whiskey switch or a Scotch switch, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It's wine or vodka. That's what I drink.
Wine or vodka.
White, pink, or red wine? Do any of them?
Noir.
Pinot Noir. There you go.
Is it Tito's vodka? Is it the Tito's?
No, it's Nikolai cheap vodka.
Well, that'd be there probably ought to be a psychic scale on drinks in a liquor store, and you can see where you are as far as the switch effect of different brands.
Right.
Well,
it'd be another marketing ploy for the marketers of alcohol. I think it'd be great.
Right. But now, Trey, I was going to go ahead and tell a little project that we are looking at doing. And I think that your strangeness level might increase.
Oh, so it could kick me out of the low strangeness to a medium or a subpar strangeness, as opposed to a almost zero number.
We have a mutual friend who has had many paranormal experiences in your hometown.
Yes.
And we are looking to interview him a week from Friday.
Oh, okay.
And I have a feeling that if we can get him, he wants to do this at a rather public library type place.
Really?
I believe if he would let us come to that beautiful haunted house of his, your strangeness level would increase.
Well, I think that'd be kind of fun. But like Katie said, be careful for what you wish for.
What you wish for.
I've lived most of my life perfectly happy being a low strangeness person. But, I said to my wife tonight for dinner when I was talking about what we're going to be talking about tonight, I said, I think it would be fun to experience something. As far as the strangest scale goes, I certainly don't need to go all out on the strangest scale, but just a little blip on the strangest scale, I think would be interesting.
Well, now I'm going to remind you of something, and I hope you're all right with it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time a couple of years ago that I brought you a present. You and your wife a present. They were dowsing rods.
Yep, and when they're in my hands, it was like totally non-strange. But now when my daughter had her hands on it, man, it was something. I mean, I who'd have thought? Who'd have
And that
thought?
goes with what Matt was saying, really. I mean, these
Yeah.
different frequencies that people have. And
Yes.
in the
Yes.
paranormal world, we kind of know that both girls and boys, girls a little bit more so than boys, but you're going through those puberty years and your energies are kind of going, wah! There, you can have some poltergeist activity around you when you're in, or when you have a lot of stress and trauma going on. Maybe, Trey, you've just had this nice laid back life and you have
It could
that.
be, but but now, as a Western trained physician, we look askance at pretty much any adjuvant type of therapies,
Right.
including acupuncture. But a friend of mine was a pain doctor, and he went and he took the real deal acupuncture course that took months of work. And I remember once he said this to me, that he could get rid of nausea and vomiting. And I had a patient who had Crohn's disease, and that's, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's bad, and you don't like operating on people with Crohn's disease because there's lots of complications and it's just messy. She did great post-op, no vomiting, no problems, easy. And then 3 days post-op, she starts puking up her toenails, and we nasogastric tube, used all sorts of drugs on her. That's when Zofran first came into effect, and it was like $5,000 a shot. We used that on her. Nothing touched her. And then I remembered my friend said, "Oh, I can get rid of nausea and vomiting." And I said, "Oh yeah, let's try out this." And in 20 minutes, she lost the greenness. She was pink. She pulled out her NG tube. She ate a sandwich. He put a little staple in her ear or some other place, and if she felt anything, she was supposed to squeeze it. And she didn't turn a hair, and she was out of the hospital in 2 days. It was just,
that's awesome.
It was astounding. So just because I don't understand something doesn't mean it's not real.
Right. And I was going to say too, after this night on the ranch where the hum sound went on, all the lights went out, and then we heard this strange disembodied voice. This is where the warning came from. So I've recently learned about the government just recently experimenting with these plasma ball technology where they can create a voice that comes out from a distance, right? Like, so you don't have to harm your troops in service.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But basically, and it's in the briefing document, and I was really happy to see it because both my sister and my mom and I all have memories of this terrifying night. But it basically, in this disembodied electrical voice with no power in the house, said, "Attention, we've allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Please do not cause," I think it said, "Please do not," no, it didn't say please. Don't cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. That was a scary night. But after that night, when I got home to the house, I went paralyzed for a few minutes. I was trying to talk and my words were all mumbly. And that night I got my first full-blown migraine headache with the tunnel vision, the vomiting, all that. I went through months of different medications with these severe migraine headaches and tunnel vision and missing a lot of school and all that. And finally, my mom, it was like a new thing back in the 70s. It was called biofeedback training. And they put these things on your fingertips and on your head, and you learn to go into this deep, relaxed state and raise your body temperature and things like that. And I went through biofeedback training for a year to get a handle on my migraine headaches. And I think that's another thing you can do if you want to maybe connect yourself into or be more open, I guess, to some of these high strangeness. And I have to laugh because on my bookcase over there, I have categories on my shelves, and one of the categories, as a joke, we put low strangeness, and there's a
I'm right there.
right there.
I'm right there. Yeah, I'm right there on the high strangeness shelf. That's my shelf. Yeah.
Low strangeness.
Yes, low strangeness. Well, that is really something.
That's funny. That's really funny.
Wow.
This flew by. This time flew by.
It did. It was tremendously fun. Sometimes I fall asleep, but I have not fallen asleep at all tonight.
Well, that is a nice compliment.
I think that's absolutely a compliment. So congratulations, Katie. You can come back anytime.
All right.
I was going to say, before I give Matt Delph the last question / last word for tonight, I was going to say, Katie, May I please call you in a couple of days and arrange another trip here down ScaryCast Lane? This has been the most fun. It really has.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always happy to talk about my favorite subjects, especially with good friends. So yeah.
Well, good. Well, thank you very much. And Matt Delph, there you are in Ewing, Virginia. You have the last word tonight. Take it
All right.
away.
I was just wanting to know, did you ever look when I went out west? I was out there probably about 2 months ago, and a lot of Native American lore. What did the Native American lore around that area? Did they avoid it? What was it? The Apache, Navajo,
No,
Pueblo,
this
Hopi?
area, yeah, this area in Elbert County, I mean, it was a very nomadic for the Utes. So they had a large portions of Colorado, Cheyenne, the Pawnee, the Kiowa, the Comanche. So very heavily, I mean, we had the Sand Creek Massacre really close by. So I think that's another one of those little pieces to the puzzle, right? Where you have the land, the water, the rocks that can retain memory and even traumatic. I mean, horrific stuff. When I was doing a lot of the archival research on the area, it was brutal on both sides. Just a lot of just was not a good time. This is where we had the gold rush headed westwards coming through these areas. So yes, that plays a role, just like at Skinwalker Ranch and other locations as well, in Arizona too. So
But
the
did the
Bradshaw
natives
Ranch in
avoid it?
Arizona.
Did the natives avoid it? Because I know on some certain
No.
areas, like with Skinwalker Ranch, they kind of tried to shy away from that one, but that's
Right.
what it's
No.
here.
Yeah, not to my knowledge did they avoid it. However, in getting to know a local person that has lived there for decades, it's interesting. He is a very credible witness. He's a firefighter by trade. He's also an avid elk hunter. I think there's an elk piece in some of these cases as well. But he was out elk hunting in Elbert County near the ranch during the daytime. And he said there's locations that he, big old tough guy won't go into because he just has this bad vibe. And back in, well, his picture's right here. Let me grab it. Hold on. But back in, I want to say it was 2021 November. Here it is. Yep. This right here. I don't know if you guys could see this.
Pull it down a little bit. There you go.
So he said it was approximately November of 2021. He's out elk hunting, and this thing made no noise. He said it was like two bunk cakes, one on top of each other. The top was spinning counterclockwise. The bottom was spinning clockwise, and it had this orange red glow. He looks back for a second and looks, and the thing was gone. Scared him to death. Has no idea what it was, but so this was, he said it was 4 to 5 feet in diameter and 6 to 8 feet off the ground. So this was a recent encounter. And then just this last August, the property next to his out there was a mutilation of a cattle in the daytime. So no helicopter noises, no nothing. She sees her cattle out there, and a couple hours later it was mutilated, cauterized, the whole thing, blood drain, everything, no tracks around the animal. So mystery continues.
Well, we didn't even get into the animal mutilations. We can do that another time.
Yeah, and the strange helicopters, and it goes on and on and on. So
Yeah,
definitely have
yes,
enough to fill another
yes.
hour.
Yes.
For sure.
The missing people reports is what I'm kind of curious about too in some of these areas.
Right. That's the scary part. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to get David Pilates on here and have him talk about that. Well, look,
Yeah, for
Katie,
sure.
it has been absolutely a blast having you here. We want to have you back. I'm going to give a call around tomorrow. I've got some secret work for ScaryCast to do here in the next hour. Everybody will hear about very soon, and it's good scary work, good ScaryCast work. So look, Katie Paige, thank you very much. It's been really.
Thanks for having me. It's nice meeting you both. Nice
Thank
seeing
you,
you,
Katie.
Matt.
Nice seeing you.
Dr. Trey, the Dean of ScaryCast, so glad to have you. Matt Delph, so glad to have you. I'm Dr. John from beautiful sunny Myrtle Beach, where we had some eclipse today, and we made it through. So look, thanks everybody. Be sure it will be redundant, but we'll be on YouTube and we'll be on iHeartRadio by the end of the night. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time on the one, the only, oh my goodness, ScaryCast. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.